If you are thinking of building yourself an off-road touring / bikepacking bike, this frameset could be the starting point for a very unique build, and this video has some valuable information for you. She is the happy owner, my partner Suzanne, and I'm Francisco from Bicycle Picnic. Let's get into it. This video is divided into 3 parts. First, the frame tubing, the fork, the weight, and a price comparison with 3 other similar framesets. Second, components compatibility, and third, the geometry. The frame tubing. Most middle-range bicycle frames are built out of 4130 chromoly steel with a double-butted profile, thinner walls in the middle section and thicker at the ends of the tubes, which is where frames need to be stronger. Ritchey, on the other hand, has developed its own heat-treated triple-butted steel tubes. The heat treatment makes the steel stronger. Stronger steel means thinner walls. Thinner walls means less material, and less material means a lighter frame. The steel tubes are also triple-butted. The middle section is thinner than the ends, but also one of the ends is thinner than the other end. So there are 3 different thicknesses. This way, they can be more precise when adding stiffness or compliance to each part of the frame. According to what they explain on their website, all this fine-tuning helps to reduce weight but also to have a certain enhanced ride quality. We'll be definitely asking Suzanne about the ride quality as soon as her bike is ready. We also noticed that the tubes are slightly thinner than most modern gravel bikes or mountain bikes. We are talking about the external diameter here. Normally, tubes with smaller diameters are less stiff, so they offer a more comfortable ride. The thinner tubes also give this bike a more vintage look, a bit like the rigid mountain bikes from the 90s. The fork. The fork has curved blades. This type of fork was very common in the past, and they are known for being very good at absorbing shocks, better than the current standard forks with straight blades. This is another nice detail that also contributes to the comfort and to the vintage look of this frameset. The weight and price comparison. I'll make a quick comparison with 3 other frames that are more or less in the same category. They are all steel frames that can be used for off-road touring or bikepacking with large tire clearance on 29 inches, and they are all through-axle compatible. First, we have our Ritchey Ascent that's built out of triple-butted heat-treated Ritchey logic tubes and weighs 2.25 kilos on size medium, plus the fork at 1.125 kilos. This frame set sells at 1,399 euros. Next, we have the Nordist Sardinia, built out of double-butted 4130 chromoly. The frame on size ML, which is pretty much like a large size, weighs 2.75 kilos. To be able to compare with the other ones that are medium size, I'll take 10% of its weight off, so it comes to approximately 2.475 kilos, and the fork comes up to 1.18 kilos. This frame set sells for 949 euros. Then we have the Velo-Held Iron, built with 4130 chromoly heat-treated tubes. The frame weighs 2.2 kilos on medium size, and for the fork I had to ask them by email, and they kindly answered me 1.7 kilos. This frame set sells for 849 euros. And then we have the Brother Cycles Big Bro, built out of double-butted 4130 chromoly tubes. This frame weighs 2.6 kilos in medium size, plus the fork at 1.37 kilos. This frame set sells at 675 pounds, which is approximately 800 euros. There is another bike that I like a lot, and it's my own choice for my off-road touring bike. It's the Surly Bridge Club. I didn't include it in this comparison because the standards of that bike are more simple and it doesn't have the same clearance for 29 inches. But if you are interested, you can check my full frameset review and my own build I'll put the links somewhere here. Wheel and tire compatibility. This bike is compatible with through-axle hubs, 110mm hub spacing at the front and 148mm hub spacing at the back. This is a very common standard for mountain bikes and it's called Boost. The purpose of wider wheel hubs is for the frame to be able to clear wider tires, but also for the rear wheel to be able to accommodate wider 11 and 12-speed cassettes and still keep the spokes in an angle that allows for the correct stability of the wheel. The frame can take 27.5 or 29 inches wheels and the maximum tire clearance for both wheel sizes is 2.6 inches, which is enough for any bikepacking trip in my personal opinion. In general, if I feel that 2.6 inches tires are not going to give me enough control and comfort on a particular ride, instead of putting wider tires, I would go for a hardtail bike or a full suspension bike. In any case, for this bike, I know Suzanne is not going to be doing any too technical stuff, so 2.6 inches maximum tire clearance is more than enough for her. The crankset. As we just saw, the real wheel hub spacing for this frameset is Boost 148mm. This is important to keep in mind when choosing the crankset, because the crankset also needs to be a little bit wider to be able to keep what we call the chain line, which is basically having the cassette at the back aligned with the chain rings at the front. By keeping this alignment, you'll be avoiding problems like over-flexing the chain or having chain rub on the tire. For example, this is the Shimano Dior series and you can see they have a crankset for 148mm OLD frames. OLD means over lug nut dimension and it's basically what I've been referring to as hub spacing. This is the type of crankset you should look to install on this frame. The one I think we're going to be using is the M4100 B2 for 2x10 drivetrains. Front derailleur. A lot of people are using 1x drivetrains nowadays, but we actually still believe having two chain rings at the front can be really helpful when touring. So we're going to install a front derailleur on this frame. The routing for the front derailleur's housing goes down the diagonal tube and it goes straight on the derailleur, so there isn't a housing stopper. The housing is continuous. The type of derailleur we have to look for is, as they say on the website, a side swing, or as I actually found it on the internet, a front pull derailleur. So for what I understand, all side swings are also front pull, and all the side swing front pull seem to have an integrated housing stopper, so the housing can go all the way to the derailleur itself. This is an example of how it looks on my own touring bike, the Surly Bridge Club. Rear derailleur. For the rear derailleur, the frame comes with a replaceable stainless steel derailleur hanger that looks pretty sturdy, and if you ever have a little accident and you need to replace it, you can buy it for about 25 euros. For the rear derailleur, the housing is also continuous and the routing goes like this. The brakes. This frame is post-mount compatible, so you actually don't need to use the adapters like with the typical IS system. This is actually a nice detail that looks very minimal and nicely finished. The frame can take 180mm rotors at the front and 160mm at the back, which is pretty okay. The housing are continuous and the routing for the rear brake goes like this. The headset. This is another nice detail that makes this frameset very unique, and probably more expensive too. The headset is integrated and fortunately it comes with the frameset. The installation on the frame is extremely easy and no tools are required, except for the crown race that goes on the fork and that needs to be installed with a special tool. Accessories. The Ritchey Ascent has all you need to install a front or rear rack, mudguards and anything cages, 2 on the fork and 1 on the down tube. Geometry. For geometry comparisons, I recommend this incredibly useful website, bikeinsights.com. I'll put the link in the description. The first thing I noticed is that the Ascent is very short compared to the other three frames. Here, the Ritchey Ascent in white, compared to Brother Cycle's Big Bro in black. Here, compared to Nordis Sardinia, and here with the Velo Held Iron. But here I had to compare to the small size because this bike is a little bit oversized. Normally mountain bikes have a longer, more aggressive reach and touring bikes a shorter, more comfortable reach. So the Ritchey Ascent is definitely more on the touring side of reach. This also makes it possible to swap from flat bars to drop bars, as they show in their website. The second thing that also got my attention is the length of the chainstays. They are very long compared to the other bikepacking bikes, and compared to a traditional touring bike like the Surly Disc Tracker, we can see that the Ascent still has slightly longer chainstays. In terms of how the ride will feel, it means a lot of stability and more overall compliance, which results in a more comfortable ride. The downside of long chainstays is a loss of reactivity when accelerating or kicking off. I personally prefer shorter chainstays, like on my Surly Bridge Club. Here we can see they are 28 mm shorter, and I love that. But in the case of Suzanne, I know she appreciates having a more stable bike, especially when going downhill off-road. So at the end, it's a matter of preferences. For the front end geometry, we'll look at the trail number. Mountain bikes tend to have a high trail number, and that means they have a very stable steering, which helps to keep the bike in line when going fast downhill. Compared to the other three bikepacking bikes, we can see all of them have a higher trail number than the Ritchey Ascent. And then, when I compare it to my personal off-road touring bike, which is the Surly Bridge Club, I find they have a very similar trail number. And what I can tell you by experience is that this trail number, when using flat bars, gives the bike a nice steering handling for mixed terrain. So it's easy and it feels natural to go from tarmac to off-road. Conclusions. Ritchey Ascent is definitely on the expensive side of frames, and I think this is partly because of the characteristics of their own tubing, which, as they claim on their website, doesn't only make the frame lighter, but it also contributes to a certain enhanced ride quality. It also seems like many of the tubing choices and the geometry choices are going to result in a very comfortable off-road touring bike. Something that we didn't talk much about is the aesthetics of the bike, and actually that was one of the important reasons why Suzanne got this frame. The frame is really beautiful and it has a nice vintage vibe to it. The color is just fantastic. We'll be assembling this bike very soon and making a video about the full process. Like and subscribe if you want to support the channel, and see you next time.